the United haven't started the season well. What's their record? It's not great. I know it's not great. They lost 3-1 over the weekend to Brighton at home, which isn't the worst result considering how good Brighton have been. But they've won 2 games this season. One was a 1-0 win at home to Wolves, in which they weren't convincing, and the other one was a 3-2 win at home to Forest, in which they went 2-0 down inside 5 minutes. They looked fine in that Forest game. I think the 2 goals were just something that happened in football. I don't think those 2 goals were something to be concerned about. They haven't won a game away from home. They haven't come within 2 goals of a team away from home, and both of their wins have come by 1-goal margins. I say away from home in all 3 of their losses because obviously the game on the weekend was at home, and they versus Bayern Munich in the Champions League on Thursday morning. Obviously, Ten Hag has been put under the spotlight about what's going on with him and the whole. Is he what's going on with him? Is he the right man for the job? Should he leave? Should he get sacked? Will he get sacked? And obviously, the whole situations with Sancho, Anthony, and Mason Greenwood have really killed his kind of squad depth. I think the Greenwood one we can toss aside because that's been happening for a while. But the Anthony one and the Sancho one have been massive kind of have massively influenced and have been massively influential in United's downfall, I want to say, or poor start to the season. Obviously, neither Sancho nor Anthony were involved in the matchday squad. Their winger options included Garnacho, Palestri, and that's about it. If you want to really include both of them, they're both really young and very raw, so it'd be very harsh to put the whole club's hopes on them. They played, obviously, Rashford, of course, he's probably their best winger at the time, but they almost played him as a central striker with Højlund. So from a lineups perspective and from a team perspective, it's really concerning. I was posed this question. I say I was posed this question. I was having a conversation. The conversation topic was, which starting 11 would you prefer, Manchester United's or Brighton's? And I mean, if we look at personnel wise, probably United's in terms of if you go player by player. You probably take Onana over Steele. Steele's very good, but probably Onana, you probably do take him just based on the credits in the bank he's got. That back 4, you probably split. The midfield 2/3, you probably split, maybe give it 3-2 to United. And then that front line, you probably give 2 to United and then one to Brighton, obviously being Matoma, who's a freak. Didn't play that well on the weekend, but he's still very good. But regardless, as a team, the gap and the distance between Brighton and United as a football team is staggering. Like, it's staggering. I watched that game. That was the game that was the main game on Goal Rush, which the fact that English people don't have a Goal Rush is insane. But for those who know, you know. That was the main game on Goal Rush, and I was watching that game almost in awe about how just good Brighton were. Probably not how good Brighton were in specifically related to Brighton, but mainly in comparison to United. It was just like, wow, Brighton are just killing United, like especially in possession. The amount of they created far better or far more big chances playing out wide and using the channels. It was a far more convincing and what's the word I'm looking for? A far more convincing and clinical game from Brighton away from home at Old Trafford. It was insane to think about, and I think this 90 minutes almost was a microcosm of a bigger problem at United, like a far bigger problem that is currently plaguing Old Trafford and obviously the whole club, right? It starts from the top, and I speak to United fans, and of course the fish rots from the head, the phrase that I haven't stopped hearing for the past 7 months when it comes to United. But where do you start? Because there's a couple of factors that, yes, United have been kind of at fault with and haven't, if that makes sense. So obviously the factors that they aren't in control of, the Anthony situation, it's a very, very much right now a wait and see. I'm not going to comment. I spoke about it briefly, just outlining what happened. I'm not going to comment on it yet because it's very much a wait and see. The Greenwood situation out of their control, and their 2 players, regardless of the fact that Mason Greenwood is a fuckwit and a prick and a cunt, that whole incident is out of United's control, and they did their due diligence, probably in a very lax way, but they eventually reached As things stand, they reach a correct outcome in which he doesn't play for Manchester United at the current moment, which is great. Yes, it's on a loan, and yes, we might not know what happened in the future, but as things stand, he's not playing for United. Good result. Out of their control, but that's the best result. Anthony, once again, not playing for United at the moment, but once again, I appreciate United doing their due diligence and taking this seriously, removing it from the team, removing from the spotlight and all the media scrutiny, and allowing the case to be done lawfully. Sick. Awesome. Great. That's two situations out of their control. Now, let's look at the Jadon Sancho case. Jadon Sancho obviously was well known to be a youth academy product at Manchester City. Went to Germany for a fresh start and started killing it for Borussia Dortmund, right? As a lot of younger players have. And that club seems to be a breeding ground for a lot of younger players who can really thrive under the atmosphere at that club, right? He went to United for £100 million and didn't really hit the ground running. But I think a lot of people, you give players time, right? You give players time, especially Sancho. Yes, despite the price tag that was put on him, still a very young player, right? So you can't expect him, especially at such a young age, to just come in and go bang, right? And just start having 25 goal contributions in a season, right? Despite the price tag. So we gave him a season. I think we're now in his third season, I think. We're in his third season, aren't we? Let me just double check. We're definitely in at least his second, right? I'm pretty sure it's his third. End of 21, yeah. So 21, 22, 22, 23, 20, yeah. So we're in his third season right now. And obviously he's been exiled from the squad because of disciplinary issues, training issues. Ten Hag has been very vocal about Sancho. Sancho has been very vocal back. There seems to be a massive disconnect between both parties. This is one of those things where it's almost I want to say sliding doors moment, because I don't think Jadon Sancho is the guy to fix United's problems. Even if you put United in that team on the weekend, I still think they lose, right? Just based on how they've played. But I think it symbolises quite a lot about the state of that club. I was very pro Ten Hag, right? And I have been very vocal about my appreciation, I guess, for Erik Ten Hag and his managerial acumen and his ability to transform a club. We also already did at Ajax, and we've seen his ability to take players and transform them and to create a very good fluid system and really galvanise a club. I think he's been very unlucky with how well Ange Postecoglou has been doing at Spurs, and we'll touch on Ange a little bit later on, probably in a completely separate point. But when you look at what Ange has done at Spurs, when you look at what Arteta was able to do last season at Arsenal, granted this was Ten Hag's first season last year, and it was Arteta's would have been fourth year, I think, last year. So it's apples and oranges to a certain extent, of course, right? But still, you're seeing these clubs under new managers have their club completely galvanised. Obviously, what Eddie Howe's done at Newcastle, having clubs completely galvanised and have such a transformation in feelings, energy, vibe, etc., etc., and of course, naturally, on-field performance. United last year, in my opinion, did exactly what they were going to do. I had them finishing they finished third or fourth last year, but they did exactly what I had in mind for them. Let me just double check actually, because that's actually quite poor from me. I should remember. They finished third. They finished third, comfortably in the top four, but not really challenging for the title, which is where I had them. I had them finishing fourth or third. In my mind, potentially slipping to fifth if results didn't fall their way. But the overall theme of the season for them was going to be they were going to be fine. They were going to just naturally progress. They might lose some games they shouldn't. They'll win some games they shouldn't. They'll lose some games they shouldn't. They'll win some games they should. And that's what happened, right? They won a trophy, I think. They did win the Community Shield, I think. So it's one of those things where it's like, in my opinion, we saw a perfectly linear progression for Manchester United last season. And I think you have to praise Erik Ten Hag a lot for last season because of all the turmoil that was surrounding the club, obviously with the owners, with Ronaldo, with Greenwood, a lot of turmoil, a lot, right? And he still managed to get top four, and they won a trophy. I'm almost certain they won a trophy. It was the Community Shield. No, it wasn't. It was the Carabao Cup, right? Yeah, they beat Newcastle because Karius was in goal. Yeah, for that game. That's the storyline I remember for some reason. So yeah, I think you have to kind of appreciate Ten Hag's performance last season. And it was a perfectly linear kind of, it was a perfectly linear progression. However, football and sport isn't linear. Progression is never linear. There are peaks and troughs, and there are times where you are progressing really well, and then you just fall, and then bang, you bounce back up, right? How many times have we seen that in sport, where teams go up, crash down, and then they're back up, or they crash down and they're back up for a year, and then they crash back down? Football and sport is never linear. So I think the fact that so many people are jumping to conclusions about United's start to this season, a little bit concerning, considering the signings that they haven't got, I should say. They've still got McTominay in that midfield, which is unbelievable. Yes, they signed Mount, who I'm assuming is injured considering he didn't play. Højlund, I think, will be a good signing. I think I spoke about him last week or the week before. I think he's going to be a fine signing. I think he was quite good. I think he's been quite good early on in the season. He just hasn't been able to find that rhythm, which, considering the dysfunctional nature of United's team right now, you can't really blame him, right, for not firing. So there's those two. There's those two players, obviously, and then obviously who else? Yeah. Varane's out. They signed Amrabat, who I think will be a good signing for them. So they'll get players back. They'll get structure back. They'll get continuity back, and I think eventually, I back Ten Hag in. I do. I still back Ten Hag in. I think they're gonna get it right on the pitch. Bring Amrabat in. Bring Mount back in, bring Varane back in, get Højlund up and running, get some more games into Garnacho and Palestri because you're going to need to, considering they have fuck all wingers because of what's happened. Obviously, Anthony and Greenwood out of the control. Sancho, a little bit more of a tangible and a little bit more of a controllable case. So I think on the field they'll eventually get it right. I think they will. I'm not going to jump to conclusions yet. I can't remember where I had them in my preseason predictions. I think I did have them in the top 4. But I don't think we should be jumping to conclusions about sack Ten Hag, should Ten Hag leave, etc. Well, maybe not that second point. Should Ten Hag leave? Erik Ten Hag is obviously this question has been posed and been thrown around constantly, right, throughout the football kind of media, in a sense, landscape, right? I don't know necessarily about kind of Ten Hag, what he can offer in terms of, I don't know, maybe not what he can offer, but how he will respond to this kind of criticism. Because at Ajax, there wasn't a lot of criticism, right? That's probably the one flaw or kind of question mark. How will Erik Ten Hag respond to criticism? This is the first time probably in his managerial career, especially at United, that he's under major criticism. Performances aren't good, off-field dramas left, right and centre, the board's a mess, the fans are angry, he's making bad decisions. Obviously, we all saw the reception when Højlund got booed off, right? So I think Ten Hag, it's going to be a really interesting talking point, a really interesting thing to see what will develop of it, because I don't think Erik Ten Hag should leave. I want to get that clear, right? I don't think Erik Ten Hag should leave. I think Erik Ten Hag, like I said, he will eventually get it right. Once he gets those players back, like Mount, Amrabat, Varane, once he gets those players back, hopefully Sancho gets introduced back into the squad very soon. I think on the field, they'll get it right. I back Ten Hag and I think the players are good enough to keep them at a very, very respectable level, right? However, what I do worry about is all of the off-field stuff, the board, the fans, the overall turmoil surrounding that club right now. I don't know if he will be able to overcome that. Will he succumb under pressure? I don't know, but I think genuinely it could get to the point where he breaks, just completely breaks, as I fix the camera focus, and just basically, I wouldn't say quits, but stops maybe performing at his level and starts to let the pressure get to him and starts to crumble, because it's intense. All the off-field stuff, the fans are angry, the board are unhappy, the board want to sell the club, the fans want the board to sell the club, but the board aren't selling for a reasonable price, yet the board aren't investing, so the fans aren't happy, and the fans aren't happy at Ten Hag because he's not getting the best out of very mediocre players like Scott McTominay. It creates a shitstorm. It creates a shitstorm that could just burst. Does Ten Hag have the charisma to deal with that? Who knows? Does Ten Hag have the cojones to deal with that? Who knows? What I do know is that on the field, he'll get it right. Once he gets his players back, the performances will start to get better. But if the fans are continuing to battle against the board are continuing to battle against the fans, and the board's going to battle against Ten Hag's going to battle against the board, as well as other players like Sancho and others potentially, that's my worry. That is my worry for United, not the on-field stuff, because the squad's too talented, right? Once he gets his players back, the squad's too talented, and Ten Hag's too good of a manager. Far too good of a manager for him to just basically be like, no, I just can't figure this out, and for United to crumble. It's going to be a really tricky situation. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see. It's one of those things where it's a kind of wait and see what develops kind of thing, because I don't know. It's really interesting. Real interesting.